And it is 26 to 9. Good to be with you this morning. Well, a Labor win was expected, but nobody quite predicted the landslide that it was, securing Anthony Albanese a second term in government and possibly even a third, given Labor could end up with a 50-seat margin. Now, the Liberals were wiped out in cities right across the country. In WA, it hung on to Durack, Forrest, O'Connor and Canning, and is in a tight battle in Bullwinkle. The Liberal Party has lost its leader, it's lost its future leaders, and has clearly lost its way. So what is the direction it needs to take? 1300 222 720. Now I have with me in the studio Linda Reynolds. She's a WA Liberal Senator, a former minister who is retiring in a couple of months, and one that has responded to our calls for an interview. Linda Reynolds, good morning and thank you for joining me.
Good morning, Nadia.
Were you surprised by the scale of the coalition loss?
I was surprised by the scale. I wasn't surprised by the loss, but I was surprised by the scale.
When did you get a sense that things were turning badly for the coalition in the campaign?
Well, I've been working on 3 campaigns here in Perth, Pearce in the north, sort of Hasluck in Ellenbrook, and also Bullwinkle in that sort of outer metropolitan rim. And it really felt like it was starting to turn at the beginning of pre-polls. The Labor's campaign for that middle ground, the Medi-scare and also their demonisation of Peter Dutton really started to kick in, and I think it started to harden people against us more than for the Labor Party.
What about the policy offerings, shambolic, thought bubbles, that they're the kind of words being used to describe them, taking things away from people? Labor will give you a tax cut, we'll take it away. Students, Labor's going to give you a 20% discount on your HECS debt, we're going to take it away. Working from home, can't do that anymore. You need to go back. Oh, and by the way, public servants, you might lose your job.
Look, Nadia, I think you make very good points on all of those, but now reflecting on, after having a couple of days to reflect, I think the problems that we experienced are far more widespread than simply policy in terms of what we developed and how we implemented it over the course of the campaign and prior to that. I think the seeds of our current situation have been long coming and require, there's no sugarcoating the position the party now finds itself in, both federally and here in WA in the state. You can see through successive reviews in federal and state in terms of where we have taken the wrong turn, but we haven't comprehensively understood those lessons and we certainly haven't implemented the reforms that are needed. So we do need a root and branch review, not just of our policies, but also our organisation, our values, how we actually conduct ourselves as a party, and how we find ways to reconnect with a changing community.
I want to talk more about that. Linda Reynolds is my guest this morning, a retiring Liberal Senator for WA, also a former Liberal Minister. On the campaign, and then I do want to move on to those reforms you talk about, do you think the Liberal campaign relied too much on the politics of fear and division?
I would actually say that Labor actually did that. It was very clear out on the ground. So not to say that we didn't have some negative or campaigning, but Labor really ramped up their negative campaigning against Peter Dutton and also lying about our policies that we were going to take away, Medicare and other things like that, which was absolutely never the case. So we just had such comprehensive failure of how we developed our campaigns and how we implemented them. One thing I would like to say, though, about that on the ground...
Just on that point, though, describing media as hate media, describing journalists as biased, bringing in welcome to countries, those kind of things, do they really matter at the end of the day?
Well, that's one of the many things for us to review, because I don't think we went into this election, as we haven't in previous elections, with a really clear idea of who we are as Liberals, what our core values are, what shapes us as Liberals, and our tribes became too important rather than our Liberal values and how we communicate those to a changing community, and then how do we reflect that in policies and how we communicate. So it was a very comprehensive failure.
How would you describe Well, actually, what about the perception that Peter Dutton was Trump-like? Was it hard to shake that perception?
It was. And Labor and the Greens were very effective in portraying Peter in that sense. I did not see that in him when he was out campaigning in our seats, but there was certainly that perception, which wasn't very helpful.
Linda Reynolds is my guest this morning, retiring Liberal Senator for WA at 21 to 9, and I will make time for your calls this morning, 1300 222 720. So how do you describe the state of the Liberal Party now?
I think as a party, we have lost our way. If you take here in Western Australia, we've become two tribes. We've always had to balance the two different, in some senses, competing philosophies. So we've got the classic liberalism philosophy and also the conservatives. And we are at our best when we balance those and we communicate that in ways to the Australian public that is relevant to them and that we deliver a balanced approach in terms of, on one hand, providing strong leadership on national security, on defence, on law and order, but also balancing that with compassion for social policy. And we haven't done that very effectively for some time, and people are just not relating to us. And our candidates don't reflect the nature, the broad nature and the diverse nature of our communities either. So there's a lot of things we've got to review and reform. Because
you can't just blame Labor for your losses.
No. If you go back and have a look at any of our reviews of recent state and federal elections here in WA, it is very clear where we've been going wrong, but we haven't, as a party, really accepted that and implemented those reforms. And some of them are quite challenging, reforms on gender, reforms on policy, finding that balance between both sides of our party. They're not easy, but if we don't do that, I'm confident we can, but we'd be deluding ourselves to think that we don't have a significant reform journey ahead of us.
Oh, I cut you off earlier. You said there was one thing you wanted to say. Have you covered that?
I have.
Okay, good eye. I felt rude doing that, so I do apologise. Okay, well, Curtin was a seat that you were pretty confident that you'd get back, and Kate Chaney has retained that and in fact got a 1.5% swing towards her. This was her take on the state of the Liberals. She was speaking to me yesterday.
The 2022 election sent a message to the Liberal Party that they were moving too far away from too far to the right and away from moderate voters in places like Curtin. That message has been reinforced last night, and I really hope that the Liberal Party spends less time thinking about attacking and point scoring and more time thinking about what the country actually needs. And I'll be very interested to see the language that's used in this time after the election by the Liberal Party and see whether it's about how do we win back this group or that group, or actually what does the country need, what sort of leadership does the country need, and focus on the substance, not the point scoring.
So what does it say about your support base if you can't get back the bluest of blue seats?
We've got a lot of work to do. We really do have a lot of work to do. And not only do we have to go back and really reconnect with our core values, but also working out now how do we communicate that to a new generation, because the Australian community has moved and their expectations are different. And I firmly believe that our values are just as relevant today as they have been. But one, we haven't been focused enough on them, and we certainly haven't been focused enough on how do we communicate that effectively to people across our community. So it's not just in what used to be blue ribbon Liberal seats, but it's also to the people in outer suburbs who work really hard, who are aspirational for their lives. We need to find a new way to communicate that. But to do that, we've got to be united.
You talk about two tribes. Are we talking about an influence here, an unhealthy influence of the clan, that religious right that has seen the party move too far to the right?
It's not just here, yes, and it's not just here in Western Australia. You see across the country in the Liberal Party that factions have become more important than the party itself. And it's very clear people are not voting for a faction. it's clan, right, or whatever you call it, people are looking at whether they're going to vote for the Liberal Party. And within our party, this is why I say we need to come back to our values as who we are, what unites us as a party, not what divides us. And at the moment, for many people in the party, who are all volunteers, members of the community, is the differences have become more important than what unites us as a party. And we do have to address that.
The influence of the clan and that religious right, how strong is it? Give us an understanding.
Oh, look, it's still very strong here in the Liberal Party. It hasn't gone away. Now, whatever you call it, there is still a very strong conservative movement in the party that needs to be addressed and needs to be balanced, because it does not represent mainstream Australian and West Australian values.
Your traditional support base.
Absolutely.
They've turned the way in droves.
Yes, they have.
So how do you change that?
Well, the first thing I'd like to see here in Western Australia is a very active review of the party. And, well, great place to start would be to the last state and federal reviews, which do provide a good signpost to what has gone wrong.
This is the conversation we had 4 years ago with Liberal, but you could actually just give them the review from 4 years ago because it covers everything you've talked about. 3 reviews all make the same conclusion.
And we do have to have a look at ways that, whether it's through quotas, whether it's through targets, we do have to look at ways of how we do our pre-selections, when we pre-select, and to make sure that we've got candidates who do actually represent, look like, sound like, and think like, the broader Australian community, and we simply don't have that.
I've got a text that's come through from a couple of people, and this one says, as a female, all I see in the Liberal Party is an ocean of males.
I totally agree. And it's one of the issues I've been fighting for a very long time in the Liberal Party. And in fact, 10 years ago, I was part of a review into gender that was conducted out of the Federal Secretariat, and we recommended targets and a plan on how to get there without quotas. And that's been the Liberal Party policy for 10 years, but it's just sat on a shelf. So we do have to have the hard conversations now about how do we become more gender balanced, but also a broader diversity. And how do we then make our party relevant again? Because, Nadia, what a lot of people don't realise is that when the Liberal Party was formed, we were the progressive national party with Robert Menzies and Dame Elizabeth Couchman not as in progressive now as we understand it as more woke, but progressive as standing for women. And in fact, until 2001, the majority of Australian women voted for the Liberal Party. And that seems almost inconceivable now. So we have to understand why women have turned away from our party and change.
Let's ask them. 1300 222 720. I would like to hear from women who used to vote for the Liberal Party who now don't. What is the reason? And I guess what will get you back, I think, is the question that the Liberal Party is asking this morning. I'll get to your calls in a moment. 1300 222 720. It's 13 to 11, and I've got Linda Reynolds with me. She's a Liberal Senator for WA for 2 more months, and then she is retiring. And just on the issue of gender, I look at, say, the seat of Forest. Nola Marino, woman, retires, replaced by a man. Did that disappoint you?
Look, it did, not because I don't have great respect for Ben Small, who is a fabulous, he was a senator, and he will be a fabulous local member. So it's not about individuals, but when I have a look round at what we've done over successive elections, we have sat at about 20% of women elected, because quite frequently women get pre-selected into seats that are very difficult to win. So when they do win, they're the first to lose when there's an electoral swing. And as a party, we have been slow to understand that women bring great benefits to the party. Women are fabulous local members. They represent their local communities. They've got the qualities, the empathy, but also the ability to act. And it resonates in some of the ways that you quoted Kate Chaney on today. So we do have a lot of amazing women in the Liberal Party, but we have to find ways of encouraging them to run in seats where they can win. And we just don't have that process at the moment. And that's one of the things I'm convinced we need to tackle.
What's been touted this morning is a potential Angus Taylor as leader with Jane Hume as his deputy. Is that the way forward?
Look, there's a lot of discussions to be had and they're just starting, so I certainly don't want to preempt a leadership ballot that we'll have in the next couple of weeks back in Canberra. But in the Senate, again, it's not widely known, but the Liberal Party, the coalition, has an all-female leadership team. So our party is led by Michaelia Cash, the amazing Michaelia Cash, and Anne Ruston as the deputy, and a female whip. So, and they are a brilliant team. So I would certainly be having a look at the candidates, but I am very favourably disposed towards Susan Lee, who I think would be a great and a very healing and receptive leader for our party. But we've still got a way to go yet before we have that vote.
Andrew Hastie, no?
I'm not sure Andrew's definitely putting his hand up, so I'll have a look to see who does put their hand up, but I would certainly like to see a woman up.
Finally, Linda Reynolds, Labor could have 50 more seats than the coalition. They've got 85 at the moment, coalition sitting at 39, 16 still in play. Is it feasible that Labor could actually win a third term if coalition does not make the changes you're talking about?
Look, I think if the rumours of our long-term demise are very premature, but I think there's no doubt that without us going through a really honest review of where we went wrong, across the board, we've still got time to tackle it. And I think for our nation's sake, we need to, because we've got a system of government here where you have to have two strong major political parties in our Westminster system. And as I now look at that thumping majority Labor have now got in the lower house, it looks like they will also, with the Greens, have the balance of power in the Senate. And what Labor have already demonstrated over the last term is with the Greens and David Pocock, they have just factoried through hundreds of pieces of legislation denying the Senate the opportunity to scrutinise, which actually is incredibly important for our nation. So I think there's a number of consequences, but that then makes it even more important, I think, for us to have an honest review early and start reconnect with our values and find new ways of communicating that to West Australians. We've still got a lot to offer, but we're clearly not getting that message out yet.
Because I think if the federal party needs proof of what you're saying, they probably just need to look at the state Liberal Party.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Nadia.
Linda Reynolds there, retiring Liberal Senator for WA. She was also a former Liberal minister.